Look closely at the religious landscape across America today, and you will see something that was completely unthinkable just 20 years ago. Walk past the massive suburban campuses. Look at the towering glass auditoriums, the multi-level parking structures, the indoor coffee shops, and the empty amphitheaters designed to seat 8,000 people at a time. For nearly half a century, we were told that this was the absolute peak of modern Christian faith. We were told that bigger was always better, that growth was proof of God's blessing, and that the future of spirituality belonged to high-tech stages, professional rock bands, and celebrity communicators. Today, those massive complexes are falling silent. Across the United States, an undeniable transformation is taking place right before our eyes. Within the next few years, at least half of all American megachurches will permanently close their doors and disappear. Their properties are being listed on commercial real estate markets. Their multi-million-dollar audio systems are being sold at auctions. Massive facilities that once bustled with tens of thousands of people every weekend are being converted into commercial shipping warehouses, public charter schools, medical offices, or simply torn down to make room for apartment complexes. If you evaluate this shift through the lens of corporate business or institutional religion, it looks like a catastrophic defeat. It looks like the decline of faith itself. Do not be deceived, this is not a tragedy. The collapse of the megachurch is not the death of genuine faith. It is the dismantling of a commercial enterprise that should never have replaced the living church in the first place. What we are witnessing is not an ending to mourn, but a long overdue liberation. The era of religious spectacle is collapsing under its own weight so that something pure, honest, humble, and truly unstoppable can take its place. To understand why half of these massive organizations are destined to vanish, we must look honestly at how they were engineered. Between 1990 and 2020, the number of megachurches in the United States skyrocketed from roughly 300 to nearly 1,800. This explosive expansion did not happen by accident. It was powered by a calculated corporate strategy that borrowed heavily from retail franchises and entertainment venues. The playbook was clear: treat the church attendee as a consumer looking for an entertaining weekend experience. Build an auditorium with world-class lighting, arena-quality sound, and comfortable theater seating. Keep the sermons light, positive, and motivational, carefully avoiding any difficult truths that might make a visitor uncomfortable. Put a magnetic, charismatic communicator on the platform to serve as the face of the brand. Borrow massive amounts of money from commercial banks to build bigger campuses, and use the incoming donations to service the debt. Between the years 2000 and 2010 alone, American megachurches took on an estimated $7 billion in collective bank debt. Churches regularly borrowed $30 million, $50 million, and sometimes over $100 million to construct sprawling campuses with indoor food courts, retail bookstores, and multi-story atriums. The entire system rested on one single dangerous assumption: the crowd would never stop growing and the money would never stop coming. The formula worked like a financial engine. More attendees meant more donations. More donations allowed the church to secure larger loans. Larger loans built bigger buildings, and bigger buildings drew in even larger crowds. Banks lined up to lend money. Real estate developers competed for lucrative construction contracts. Pastors began to act less like spiritual shepherds and more like corporate chief executive officers managing multi-million-dollar entertainment brands. But beneath the surface of this rapid expansion lay a fatal flaw. The model was engineered to build audiences, not disciples. It taught millions of people to become passive consumers of a weekend show rather than active, self-sacrificing servants of God. It created fans of famous preachers instead of people deeply rooted in genuine spiritual discipline. And when an entire religious system is built on consumerism, personality, and debt, it creates an empire made of glass, impressive to look at but fragile to the core. The first major cracks in the foundation did not come from external opposition. They came from the inside, through a pattern of unchecked power, spiritual abuse, and moral failure. Because megachurches operated as independent corporations, they frequently eliminated traditional systems of accountability. Governing boards were often filled with the pastor's close friends, business associates, or family members. Financial records were kept strictly confidential, hidden from the very people filling the offering buckets. One charismatic individual held absolute authority over the entire organization. Look at what happened when those charismatic figures fell. In Seattle, Mars Hill Church expanded from a small living room gathering into a network of 15 locations across several states, boasting 15,000 members. It was built entirely on the aggressive personality and magnetic communication style of Mark Driscoll. Yet behind the scenes, staff members endured an environment of spiritual manipulation, verbal bullying, and financial irregularities. When an internal revolt forced the founder to step down in 2014, the organization did not slowly downsize, it completely vanished. Within 4 months, all 15 campuses were closed, the assets were liquidated, and an organization that took nearly 2 decades to build disappeared in 120 days. In Chicago, Harvest Bible Chapel followed the exact same trajectory under James MacDonald. An empire with over 13,000 weekly attendees, a national radio broadcast, and multi-campus properties collapsed into bankruptcy after decades of financial mismanagement, executive overreach, and abusive leadership were exposed. Membership dropped by more than 90% in a single year. At Willow Creek Community Church, the very institution that taught thousands of other pastors how to run a corporate church, its founder, Bill Hybels, was forced into resignation after credible allegations of sexual misconduct spanning decades were brought forward by multiple women. The investigation revealed that the institution had repeatedly protected the powerful founder while silencing the victims in order to protect the organization's reputation. These were not isolated events. From Hillsong in New York to massive ministries in Texas and California, the story repeated itself again and again. When a church is built around the personality of a human being rather than the character of Christ, the fall of that leader destroys the entire house. Millions of people watch these institutions prioritize public relations over honesty, protect abusers over the vulnerable, and protect their revenue streams at all costs. The trust was not merely damaged, it was completely broken. As trust began to erode, people started doing something they had never done before. They started examining the finances. For decades, ordinary families gave faithfully out of their hard-earned incomes, believing their contributions were directly feeding the poor, sheltering the homeless, supporting overseas missions, and spreading hope to the broken. Then the financial audits and public disclosures came to light. In a typical American megachurch, 50% to 60% of the total budget went straight to servicing massive mortgage debts and maintaining giant facilities. 25% to 30% went to executive staff salaries and administrative overhead. Often, less than 10% to 15% of the entire multi-million-dollar budget was allocated to actual community outreach, benevolence, or charitable missions. Congregations suddenly realized that the vast majority of their sacrificial giving was not going to help the needy. It was going to pay the electric bill on an empty 5,000-seat auditorium and fund the executive lifestyles of senior leaders. At the same time, the internet made the extravagant lifestyles of celebrity preachers visible to the entire world. People watch pastors live in $10 million gated estates, wear designer clothing worth thousands of dollars, and publicly demand private corporate jets, all while preaching a prosperity gospel that promised God would make people wealthy if they simply gave more money to the church. Younger generations opened their Bibles and read the words of Jesus, who warned that a person cannot serve both God and money, who walked in humility, and who told his followers that true greatness is found in becoming the servant of all. The contrast between the humble way of Jesus and the corporate empire of the megachurch was too wide to ignore. The financial illusion was shattered, and people simply stopped paying for it. This brings us to the present reality, and why the disappearance of at least half of these institutions is a mathematical certainty. The collapse is being driven by two unstoppable forces: demographics and debt. First, look at the generational shift. The generation that sustained, funded, and loved the centralized corporate megachurch model, the baby boomers, is rapidly aging. The generations that follow, millennials and Gen Z, are completely uninterested in the megachurch model. They do not want a dark room with flashing stage lights. They do not want a polished marketing campaign or a performance that feels like a television show. They can get entertainment anywhere in the world on their smartphones. What young people are desperately searching for is authenticity, depth, and community. They want to know where the money goes. They want leaders who are transparent, accessible, and humble. When they look at a massive institution requiring millions of dollars a year just to keep the lights on, they do not see a sacred movement. They see an outdated corporation. Second, look at the crushing financial reality. Following the disruptions of 2020, nearly 30% of previous attendees never returned to large church facilities. When an auditorium designed for 5,000 people suddenly averages only 1,500 people, the financial model breaks down instantly. Consider a real-world example common in every major metropolitan suburb today. A church property carrying $40 million to $60 million in bank debt. Monthly mortgage and interest payments reaching $250,000 to $300,000 every single month. Monthly maintenance, insurance, and utilities costing another $50,000 to $80,000. A drastically reduced weekly offering that can no longer cover the basic operating expenses. Property insurance rates for large commercial church buildings have surged by 200% to 300%. Interest rates on commercial loans have climbed significantly. These organizations cannot afford to stay open, and they cannot afford to sell their properties without declaring bankruptcy, because the specialized buildings are worth far less on the open commercial market than the debt owed against them. Billions of dollars in church-related real estate loans are coming due. The math does not work, the revenue is not there, and the banks will inevitably foreclose. The commercial megachurch era is officially running out of money. When you understand the depth of this collapse, you realize something profound. This is not a catastrophe, it is an act of divine mercy. In the Gospel of John, Jesus uses a powerful agricultural metaphor. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. Pruning is not destruction, it is the deliberate removal of dead wood so that life can flourish. What we are witnessing across the Western world today is the Great Pruning. God is intentionally bringing an end to the era of religious consumerism. He is clearing away the stages, the smoke machines, the celebrity pastor platforms, and the multi-million-dollar entertainment bubbles because they were never producing real spiritual fruit. Even the founders of the megachurch movement were eventually forced to admit this reality. Years before its collapse, Willow Creek conducted a massive multi-year internal study of its own congregation called Reveal. The leadership surveyed thousands of people who attended their services every week, volunteered for programs, and gave financial donations. The results of the study shocked the leadership to its core. There was almost zero correlation between participating in the megachurch programs and actually developing mature, deep, enduring Christian character. People who had attended for 10 or 20 years were spiritually shallow, deeply lonely, and entirely dependent on the emotional high of a Sunday service. The church had produced consumers of religious goods rather than self-sacrificing disciples of Christ. The fall of the megachurch is necessary because the model itself failed its primary purpose. The stage is falling so the altar can return. The celebrity is stepping down so the humble servant can be seen. The commercial debt is clearing so resources can finally flow to the broken, the poor, and the hurting. Look beyond the headlines of bankruptcies and foreclosures, and you will see something incredible happening right now across neighborhoods, towns, and cities. True faith is not dying, it is returning to its roots. While the giant auditoriums are going dark, thousands of micro-churches, house churches, and neighborhood gatherings are quietly multiplying. Gatherings of 20, 50, or 100 people meeting in living rooms, community centers, parks, and dinner tables. Communities where people actually know one another by name, share meals together, confess their struggles, and bear each other's burdens. Fellowships where leaders do not have executive security teams, private dressing rooms, or multi-million-dollar salaries, but live alongside the people they serve as humble shepherds. At the exact same time, millions of young people are rediscovering ancient, historic Christian traditions. They are filling historic liturgical churches, seeking contemplative prayer, deep theological study, and a sense of reverent mystery that has survived 2,000 years of human history. These small, nimble, and faithful communities do not have $50 million mortgages. They do not spend 80% of their money to air-condition concrete arenas. When a community of faith carries no debt, its resources can go directly where they belong. Feeding hungry families in the local community, paying rent for single mothers facing eviction, supporting clean water initiatives and medical relief around the world, creating authentic, loving spaces where broken people can find real hope. This is the church that cannot be closed. This is the church that cannot go bankrupt. This is the church that no cultural change, economic downturn, or political empire has ever been able to destroy. So let the real estate signs go up across the nation. Let the multi-million-dollar entertainment complexes be sold. Let the era of celebrity-driven religion pass quietly into history. More than half of America's megachurches will vanish, and it is the greatest reason we have to be encouraged. Because when the artificial lights go out and the noise of the production finally fades away, we are left with the unshakable foundation that was always there from the beginning. A faith that does not need stadium seating to love a neighbor, a truth that does not need a marketing strategy to transform a human life, and a Savior who never asked us to construct monuments of glass and steel but simply promised, "Where two or three gather in my name, there am I with them." The age of the spectacle is over. The age of real faith has begun.